Welcome everyone to our June 2022 market update. For the second time in a row, and unlikely to be a surprise to many of you, I have a negative quarter to report. This is the first time that we've had consecutive negative quarters since March 2009. This chart shows the growth of $1 invested across various asset classes for the 3 months ended 30 June. The top performer over 3 months was global infrastructure in orange, where $1 invested 3 months ago would have grown to $1.04. In second place, where being flat was meritorious, was cash, where $1 invested 3 months ago would still be $1. Somewhat surprisingly, given the locus of geopolitical tension, in third place is emerging markets, where $1 invested 3 months ago would have fallen to 99 cents. Down the bottom, in black, don't mention the All Blacks, $1 invested in New Zealand property would have fallen to 87 cents. A 50-50 mix of cash and property and shares and fixed interest would have fallen to 94 cents. Not a great continuation of the 2022 calendar year. This slide shows the growth of $1 invested across those same asset classes, this time for 12 months. To quote every rugby captain's post-game speech from the 80s, it was a game of two halves. Broadly, most asset classes were positive as at the end of December. Fast forward 6 months, and most are not. The leader over 1 year is still global infrastructure in orange, where $1 invested 12 months ago would have grown to $1.15. In second place, in green, again, is cash, where $1 invested 12 months ago would still be $1, well, $1.01. Middle of the pack is that 50-50 mix of shares and property and cash and fixed interest, where $1 invested 12 months ago would have fallen to 92 cents. Wow, that's a rough second half. However, while 1 year is interesting, it is not long enough. I always say we need to look at least 3 years' data. This slide shows the growth of $1 invested 3 years ago across those same asset classes. The leader over 3 years is unhedged international shares in navy, where $1 invested 3 years ago would have grown to $1.33. In second, in orange, is global infrastructure, where $1 invested 3 years ago would have grown to $1.26. That 50-50 mix of shares and property and cash and fixed interest would have grown to $1.07. That is an undeniably underwhelming result. That rough second half I mentioned when talking about 1 year's return made a big difference. As at the end of December, that 50-50 mix of shares and property and cash and fixed interest would have grown to $1.19. So what's caused that drop? In short, the bears. With apologies to John Irving, probably most famous for The World According to Garp, or The Cider House Rules if you prefer a movie adaptation, whose first movie was Setting Free the Bears, I want to talk about the bears in the room. Bear markets. There has been a lot of media coverage this year about what a bear market means, how long bear markets last, and what being invested in a bear market might mean for me. Spoiler, I might not be able to set you free from the bears, although that didn't actually work out too well for John Irving's protagonist, but I might be able to set you free from being worried about being invested in bear markets. To begin with, what is a bear market? A bear market is characterised by persistent falls in market prices. To qualify as a bear market, prices must fall 20% from their recent high. They are typically characterised by pessimism and negative investor sentiment. The S&P 500, US's largest stock market index, entered bear market territory, a fall of 20% or more, 13 June, from its highs reached 3 January. The more technology-heavy Nasdaq Composite Index entered bear market territory 7 March, from its recent highs of 19 November 2021. The MSCI All Country World Index, that's an index composed of developed market shares and emerging market shares, entered bear market territory 13 June, from its highs reached 16 November 2021. The S&P NZX 50 index entered bear market territory 13 June, albeit a slow one, having started its decline in September last year. Logically, you might ask, how long do bear markets last? Good question. We like good questions because then we can investigate. Then we can look for evidence. The average length of a bear market on the S&P 500 index, that's the data series we have that's the longest, dating all the way back to 1929, is 289 days. As at the end of June, the current bear market was 178 days old. That means there might be some more time to run. Bear markets can be painful, but overall, markets are positive. Over this 92-year time period, markets were in bear market territory 20.6 years. Put another way, markets were positive for 71 of those 92 years. That's 78% of the time. So, if we know that bear markets last, on average, 289 days, does that mean we should get out of the bear market now and invest when things look up? In short, no. This chart shows the performance of the S&P 500 over the 12 months following entering into a bear market all the way back to World War II. That is, the performance you would have earned if you invested the day the market fall reached 20%. Some fairly large bars here. Not all of them are positive, but on average, if you had invested on the day a market fell into bear market territory, your performance for the next 1 year would have been 20.7%. That's almost double the average of the overall time period of 10.9% per annum. It didn't work every time. There were 3 bars that were negative, but even on those occasions, investors always wound up on top. It just sometimes took longer than a year. Media coverage is telling us all to be fearful, posing questions of whether we should pull out and wait for a better time to invest. The data is telling you the better time to invest is right now. And if you won't believe the data, believe the Wizard of Omaha, Warren Buffett, chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, who famously wrote in 1986, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." We might put it another way. Be disciplined when others are telling you to be impulsive. Never be impulsive. Thank you all for watching. I look forward to updating you throughout 2022.